Your wife's kid doesn't have the right to call us grandpa and grandma. I only have one grandson. Mom said that to the 14-year-old girl I've been raising for the past 10 years. Right in front of the whole family. Right on Christmas night. But what shocked me the most wasn't what Mom said. It was my 8-year-old son's reaction that followed. The little guy stood up, walked over to his sister, and said something that made the whole room freeze. Before I get into the details of this story, let me say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for taking the time to follow this story. Hello everyone. I'm Marcus, a 38-year-old industrial electrical engineer in suburban Columbus, Ohio. The story I'm about to tell happened on Christmas night last year, but it had actually been building up for a decade. I work for a company that specializes in electrical system maintenance for manufacturing plants along the Rickenbacker Industrial District, south of Columbus. It's not glamorous work, but it's enough to support my family on about $62,000 a year. I wake up for work at 5 a.m. and come home when the sun has already set. That's been my life for the past 15 years. And it was during those busy years that I met Rachel. 11 years ago, I got electrocuted while fixing an industrial electrical panel. The burn wasn't too severe, but it was enough to land me in the emergency room at Mount Carmel East Hospital on East Broad Street. Rachel was the night shift nurse that night. She bandaged my wound, and I'll never forget how she laughed when I tried to act calm, even though my hand was shaking from the pain. We talked for 2 hours while waiting for the doctor to sign my discharge papers. But what made me come back to the hospital the following week wasn't just Rachel. During that first meeting, she told me she had a little girl named Lily, who was only 4 at the time. Lily's biological dad left when she wasn't even a year old. No explanation, no phone calls, no child support. Rachel was working and raising her daughter alone, renting a small apartment in Whitehall, about 15-minute drive from the hospital. The first time I met Lily was on my 3rd date with Rachel. The little girl was sitting on a high chair at the Waffle House on Hamilton Road, her tiny hands holding a plastic fork, looking at me with curious but cautious eyes. I didn't know what to do, so I just sat down and asked what she liked to eat. Lily looked at me for a moment and answered, pancakes with smiley faces. Simple as that, but I knew I'd fallen in love with both of them. From then on, everything flowed naturally, as if life was meant to be. Lily started calling me Uncle Marcus. Then, gradually, just Uncle. I took her to Schiller Park in German Village every Saturday afternoon, taught her how to ride a bike on the little path along the Scioto River, and read her bedtime stories whenever Rachel had to work night shifts. I treated Lily like my own daughter, even though the legal paperwork didn't recognize that. A year later, I proposed to Rachel. We had a small wedding at St. Mary's Church on 3rd Street, with just family and a few close friends in attendance. Lily was our flower girl, wearing a pink dress she picked out herself at Target. It was one of the happiest days of my life. 2 years after the wedding, Mason was born. The little guy was the joy of the whole family, but what was most special was how Lily loved her little brother. She was only 7, but already knew how to help Mom change diapers and knew how to sing him to sleep with songs she had made up herself. Watching the 2 siblings together, I believed our little family was perfect, but there was a dark corner I deliberately avoided looking at. My parents, Harold and Patricia Webb, live in suburban Westerville. They've been retired for 5 years. Dad used to be a warehouse manager for a food distribution company, and Mom was an accountant for a small dental office. Their life was stable, neither rich nor lacking, and they never accepted Lily. For 10 years, they treated her like an outsider, not hateful, not abusive, but not loving either. Lily was like a shadow at family gatherings, a name mentioned with polite indifference, a child who always received cheaper gifts while Mason got expensive ones. I saw it all. I knew it all, but I kept telling myself that time would change everything, that my parents just needed more time to open their hearts. I was wrong. Time didn't change anything. It just let everything build up, simmer, until it exploded. And last Christmas night, everything I tried to hold together for 10 years completely collapsed in just a few minutes. I'd been through nearly 10 Christmases with Lily, bringing her to my parents' house dozens of times, watching her stay quiet and try to fit in with the family all those years. But I'd never felt as ashamed as I did last Christmas, when my parents, the people who should have understood better than anyone, acted like she was just a stranger who'd wandered into their party by mistake. My parents' house was decorated just as it was every year. The old plastic Christmas tree they bought from a Kmart that closed 15 years ago, cheap cinnamon candles from Dollar General, and 2 piles of gifts under the tree with such a vast size difference that anyone could tell which was which. The left pile was 3 times taller than the right one. I didn't need to guess which pile was for whom, and the atmosphere in that cramped living room was as fake as the decorations. Mom enthusiastically greeted Mason with a warm hug right at the door, while she just nodded slightly at Lily, as if she were a delivery person. Dad sat in his old recliner, eyes glued to the football game on TV, only looking up when Mason ran over to say hi to him. Meanwhile, Lily stood in the corner of the room, clutching the paper bag with the gift she'd prepared herself, trying to smile like everything was normal. Rachel squeezed my hand, her eyes asking, "Should we stay?" I squeezed back, trying to send the message that everything would be okay. But deep down, I was already starting to feel something was wrong. Dinner passed in a tense atmosphere, disguised by small talk about the weather and rising gas prices. Mom asked Mason about school, about his grades, about the youth football team he'd just joined. Meanwhile, Lily sat quietly, occasionally getting a polite question like "You're doing well, right?" And nobody cared about the answer. But the moment I feared most finally came, gift opening time. Mason was called up first. The little guy eagerly tore off the red wrapping paper, and when he saw the box inside, his eyes lit up. A brand new Nintendo Switch with 2 controllers and 3 games. A gift worth at least $400. Dad stood up, patting his grandson's shoulder with evident pride on his face, his voice warm. "I knew you liked gaming. You've been such a good boy this year. You deserve a reward." Then it was Lily's turn. She walked over to the smaller pile, picked up the only box with her name on it. I looked at the size of the box and already knew what was inside. Lily carefully unwrapped it and quietly looked inside. A children's makeup kit from Claire's, the kind for 7 to 8-year-old girls, with pale pink lipsticks that smelled like candy and glittery eyeshadow. Lily was 14, but she didn't show any disappointment. Instead, Lily looked up, gave a smile I knew she'd practiced hundreds of times, and said in a voice so polite it was heartbreaking, "Thank you, Grandma and Grandpa. I love it." In that moment, my chest felt like someone was squeezing it, because I knew she was lying, and I knew she'd gotten used to lying like that for the past 10 years. However, what happened next really brought everything to a head. Lily stood up, her hands trembling as she held the paper bag she'd been clutching all evening. She walked over to where Mom was sitting on the sofa, her voice gentle but full of hope. "Grandma, I have a gift for you." Mom looked up, a flash of surprise on her face. Lily pulled out a blue scarf from the bag, a color she knew Grandma often wore. The scarf wasn't perfect. The knitting was uneven, with some parts loose and others tight, but I knew she'd spent 2 whole months teaching herself to knit from YouTube videos. Every night after finishing her homework, Lily would sit in her room, patiently unraveling and reknitting whenever she made a mistake. Rachel told me there were nights when she found herself crying because she'd messed up, but the next morning, Lily would keep going. She handed the scarf to Grandma, her eyes sparkling as she continued, "I thought this color would look good on you. I knitted it myself." The room went silent. I saw Rachel hold her breath beside me. Mason stopped playing with his new gaming system and looked up. Even Dad turned away from the TV. And Mom, she held up the scarf, looked at it for a moment, then looked at Lily. She smiled, but that smile was so cold that I felt the temperature in the room had dropped several degrees. Then she placed the scarf on the table, as gently as putting a piece of junk mail, and spoke with a calmness that was bone-chilling. "Thank you, dear, but I have to be honest with you. Your wife's kid doesn't have the right to call us Grandpa and Grandma. I only have one grandson." Time seemed to stop. I sat there, unable to believe my ears. 10 years I'd brought Lily to this house, 10 years she'd called them Grandma and Grandpa, 10 years she'd tried to become part of this family. And with just one sentence, Mom had erased it all. Lily froze, her eyes widened, then slowly turned red. But she didn't cry. 10 years of being treated like an outsider had taught her how to hold back tears in front of people who didn't deserve to see them. Her lips trembled, but not a sound came out. Rachel shot up, her face pale. I was about to say something too, but before I could react, someone else acted first. Mason. The little guy put his gaming system down on the floor, stood up, and walked over to where Lily was standing. Without a word, he took his sister's hand, then turned to look at his grandmother. My 8-year-old son's voice rang out in the suffocatingly quiet room, clear and decisive in a way I couldn't believe was my child. "Grandma, if you're not Lily's grandma, then you're not mine either." Mom was stunned. Dad jumped up from his chair after Mason's words. But Mason wasn't done. The little guy took off the new jacket Grandpa had just given him, placed it on the floor next to the gaming system, then took his sister's hand and headed for the door. Didn't look back. Not a moment's hesitation. Dad roared, his face red with rage, his voice echoing through the room as he yelled at me. "Marcus, is this how you're raising your son?" I stood up. 10 years of silence, patience, telling myself that my parents would change. It all ended in this moment. I looked Dad straight in the eyes, my voice calm but colder than ever. "No, Dad, you taught my son. He learned from you how to treat someone he loves." Then I turned around, took Rachel's hand, and walked out the door. Nobody stopped us. No one called after us. Just the sound of the door closing behind us, and that sound rang out like the end of a long chapter in my life. For the entire 25-minute drive home on I-270, I didn't say a word. Rachel sat beside me, occasionally reaching up to wipe away tears. In the back, Mason still held his sister's hand tight, and for the first time in 10 years, Lily let tears roll down her cheeks without trying to hide them. The drive home on Christmas night, even though the evening wasn't over yet, felt longer to me than all the years I'd been my parents' son. In that moment when we were all silent, with just quiet sniffling beside me, and the comfort of an 8-year-old boy standing up to protect the sister he loved more than anything, I couldn't help but remember the first day I brought Lily to meet my parents. It was a Sunday afternoon in the fall, about 3 months after Rachel and I started dating. Lily was only 4 then, clutching a drawing she'd made to give to Grandma and Grandpa. Mom opened the door, looked down at the child hiding behind her mother's leg, then turned to me and asked a question I'll never forget. "So this little girl, you're gonna raise her?" Not "she's so cute." Not "hi there, sweetie." Just a cold question, like Lily was some burden that came with the package I had to accept. I should have picked up on something from that moment, but I chose to look the other way, and from then on, everything just continued to follow the same script for 10 years. At my wedding and Rachel's, my parents didn't take a single photo with Lily. Out of 47 wedding photos, she appeared in 3, and always at the edge of the frame, like a guest who just happened to walk by. The day Mason was born, my parents showed up at the hospital within 30 minutes, bringing flowers, balloons, and an expensive crib they'd ordered 2 months in advance. They stayed all day, taking turns holding their grandson, crying with joy. Meanwhile, Lily stood in the corner of the room watching everyone crowd around her little brother. Nobody asked her a single question. The kids' birthdays every year were the most evident proof. Mason got new bikes, gaming systems, and name-brand sports gear. Lily got toys from the clearance rack, always at least 4 or 5 years younger than her actual age. And on my parents' walls, 14 photos of Mason were hung prominently from the living room to the hallway, while there wasn't a single photo of Lily. The way they referred to the 2 kids said it all. Mason was our grandson. Lily was Rachel's daughter. But what haunted me most wasn't what I witnessed. It was what I continued to do, despite it all. 5 years ago, Dad had to retire early because of back problems. I offered monthly support not because I had money to spare, but because I genuinely believed that if I gave, then Lily would receive something in return. It started at $400. That number quickly rose to $500, then $700, and occasionally as high as $1,100 when unexpected expenses arose. Roof repairs I paid. Water heater replacement I paid. I paid for everything including medicine, supplemental insurance, and car repairs. Then there was Tyler, my younger brother. 34 years old, never held a job longer than 6 months, but always had startup projects that needed funding. Pet food delivery app, a house call car wash service, an online thrift store. Every time a project failed, he'd come back asking for more, and my parents would always play middleman. "Marcus, your brother's really struggling. Help him out." Tyler didn't come to Christmas this year because he was busy with work. To my parents, That was perfectly normal. Their youngest son was busy building his career. To my family, Tyler's absence was no different from any other year, because whether he was there or not, he'd never spoken to Lily beyond a polite hello. One night a few months ago, I sat down and calculated everything. Every payment, every year, 10 years, $103,000. That was how much I'd sent to people who refused to consider my daughter their granddaughter. Rachel had asked me if we should stop. I remember answering, "They're my parents. They'll change. Give them more time." But that Christmas night, when my 8-year-old son did what I hadn't dared to do for a whole decade, I knew it was time to take action. When we got home to our place in Reynoldsburg, I'd never felt as ashamed in front of Lily as I did that moment. She walked through the door, head down, not saying a word. I pulled her close, hugged her tight, and said the things I should have said a long time ago. "Lily, I love you. I love you just as I love Mason. There's no difference at all. No matter whose kid you are, no matter what the paperwork says, no matter what other people think, to me, you're part of this family. That will never change." She still didn't say anything, just nodded, eyes looking down at the floor, tears falling. That quiet acceptance hurt my heart more than any words of blame could have. Luckily, Mason once again did what I couldn't do. The little guy ran over to his sister, took Lily's hand, and said thoughtfully, "Lily, I'm sleeping with you tonight. I'll protect you. If anyone says mean things about you again, I'll punch them." Lily looked at her little brother, and for the first time since they left Grandma and Grandpa's house, she smiled. Just a small smile, but enough for me to know she'd be okay. In that moment, I turned to look at Rachel. She was watching the two kids, tears streaming down her face. We didn't need to say anything, just stood there watching Mason lead his sister upstairs, listening to him promise to tell her stories until she fell asleep. That was the moment I realized I had a real family, and it was also the moment I decided I'd protect that family at all costs. Around 11 p.m., the kids were fast asleep. Rachel sat on the bed, back against the headboard, lost in thoughts I could probably guess. I sat at the desk in the corner of the room, opened my laptop, and logged into my Chase bank account. The screen showed my list of recurring payments. Monthly support for my parents, $850. Supplemental health insurance for Dad, $200. House maintenance fund, $150. A total of $1,200 every month, not counting the emergency expenses and money loaned to Tyler. I moved the cursor to the first payment. My finger hovered over the cancel recurring payment button. Click. "Are you sure you want to cancel this payment?" "Yes." From behind me, I heard Rachel's footsteps coming closer. She put her hand on my shoulder, her voice gentle but full of worry. "Marcus, I don't want you to lose your family over this. Maybe Mom just spoke without thinking. She might regret it." I didn't turn around, eyes still on the screen. Lily's been calling them Grandma and Grandpa since she was 4. They had a whole decade to think, to change, to love her even a fraction as much as they love Mason. They chose not to. Click. The second payment was canceled. Rachel squeezed my shoulder tighter. "But they're your parents." I stopped, turned to look at my wife. In her eyes, I saw worry and guilt because she thought she was the cause. I took her hand and pulled Rachel down to sit beside me. "And Lily is my daughter," I said slowly. "From the day I married you, she became my daughter. I haven't protected her long enough. I stayed quiet too long. I let her suffer because I was afraid to face my parents." Each click felt like a knife cutting invisible threads that had bound me. Painful, but also liberating. When the last payment was canceled, the screen displayed, "You have no recurring payments." I looked at those words, feeling like I just put down an enormous burden. Rachel turned to me, her voice quiet. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure." We sat in silence. The feeling was so strange, relief mixed with pain, like cutting off a part of my body that had gone bad, knowing I had to do it to keep living, but still unable to deny it had once been part of me. I shut the laptop at 2 a.m., climbed into bed next to Rachel, but couldn't fall asleep. Just lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what I'd just done, thinking about what would happen next. At the time, I thought canceling the payments was the hardest part. I thought everything would calm down, that my parents would need time to think, and maybe, just maybe, they'd realize their mistake. I was wrong. The phone call at 6 a.m. the next morning was the tricky part. That morning, I woke up to the phone ringing at 6 a.m. sharp, much faster than I'd imagined. The bank automatically processed Dad's supplemental insurance payment at the beginning of each month, and that day was payment day. Just one declined payment, and Mom was already furious. I looked at the phone screen, Mom's name lighting up. Rachel stirred beside me, her eyes opening just a crack to look at me with worry. I gestured for her to stay in bed, then stepped into the hallway, gently closing the bedroom door before hitting answer. The moment I put the phone to my ear, Mom's voice rang out, trying to stay calm but unable to hide her tension. Marcus, is there something wrong with the bank? Your dad says this month's insurance payment was declined. Did you forget to update your card? I stood in the hallway, back against the wall, and took a deep breath. Nothing's wrong with the bank. I canceled it. The silence lasted long enough for me to hear the wall clock in the living room ticking. Then Mom's voice came through, utterly different from a few seconds before, switching from worry to disbelief. What did you say? I canceled everything, I said slowly. You said my wife's kid doesn't have the right to call you grandma. Well, my wife's kid doesn't need grandparents to have my money either. Immediately, Mom screamed into the phone, loud enough that I had to hold it away from my ear. These are two different things. I was telling the truth. That girl isn't Webb blood. You can't cut off your parents' money because of some kid who's not even related to the Webb family. Faced with Mom's rage, I closed my eyes, trying to keep my voice calm. Lily is my daughter. If you don't, you do nothing that. I have nothing more to say. Marcus, you listen to me. I hung up. Then, I turned the phone completely off. Standing in the quiet hallway, I looked at the dark phone screen, feeling my heartbeat pounding in my chest. No sense of victory. A deep sadness and a strange relief intertwined. A few minutes later, Rachel appeared at the bedroom door. She didn't ask anything, just walked over to me, and we stood holding each other in the hallway until we heard the kids starting to wake up. But that was just round one. 2 hours later, while the whole family was having breakfast, Rachel's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, then gave me a confused look. Tyler. I reached out to take the phone. Lily and Mason were sitting at the dining table, both looking up at me curiously. I gestured for Rachel to watch the kids, then stepped out to the backyard, closing the glass door before answering. The moment I put the phone to my ear, Tyler was already yelling. What the hell are you doing, Marcus? Mom called me crying all morning. She says you cut off all the money. I looked out at the backyard, where the swing set I'd installed for the kids was swaying gently in the morning breeze, then replied calmly. I cut the money because Mom told my daughter she doesn't have the right to call her grandma. Right in front of the whole family. Right on Christmas night. After hearing this, Tyler laughed bitterly, then spoke with complete contempt. You cut off Mom and Dad's money because of some kid that's not even yours? Lily is the kid of some guy who ran off ages ago. Your wife's got you wrapped around her finger. Wake up. Faced with my brother's insults, I gripped the phone tight, feeling anger boiling up in my chest. But I didn't let it explode. Instead, I took a breath and replied with a voice cold as ice. Lily is my daughter. What's your real problem here, Tyler? You're scared there won't be anyone to fund your next failed project, right? Silence on the other end. I knew I'd hit the right spot. Tyler didn't care about Lily or what Mom said. He only cared about his money source drying up. After a moment of silence, I continued, my voice without any hesitation. Figure it out yourself, Tyler. You're 34, old enough to stand on your own 2 feet. You're gonna regret this, Marcus. I hung up before he could finish. Standing in the backyard looking up at the gray winter sky, I thought the storm was over. 2 phone calls. 2 confrontations. Everything had been said. Now I just needed to let time do its work. But I'd underestimated my mother. The days off after that, I stopped caring about people who only cared about blood and money. I took the whole family to Easton Town Center, had pizza at Giordano's, which the kids loved, and then welcomed the new year together around the fire pit in our backyard. Even though it wasn't as crowded and festive as other years, for us, it was enough. After 3 days, Lily gradually became more stable. Rachel and I gave her another gift, a photography book she'd been wanting for a long time, along with a small pink laptop. because that would be her gear for pursuing her dream of becoming a photographer. Lily's eyes lit up when she opened the gift box, and that was the moment I knew she'd be okay. As for Mason, we gave him a Star Wars Lego set he'd been eyeing for a whole month. But what moved me most was when he said to me, "Dad, as long as she's happy, I'm happy too." I blocked all calls from my parents and from Tyler. I thought that was the final boundary, that they'd understand and leave us alone. But I was wrong. 3 days after Christmas, an old high school friend texted me, "Marcus, you should see what your mom posted on Facebook." I opened the app, found Mom's page, and my heart felt like someone was squeezing it when I read the words on the screen. The post included a photo of me when I was 10, grinning next to a new bike. Below it was a long status. "This is my son. I raised him for 38 years. Now he's cutting ties with his elderly parents because of a child who's not our blood. His wife has completely manipulated him. I've lost my son." Right below that, Tyler shared the post with a comment. "My brother has completely changed since marrying her. This is how she's isolating him from his blood family." Hundreds of comments poured in. "Poor woman. This guy's so ungrateful. Blood is everything. How can you abandon your parents for an outsider?" Praying for her to be reunited with her son soon. Rachel read those comments, her eyes turning red, then turned to ask me, "Do you want to respond?" I thought for a moment. Write a lengthy post explaining everything? Tell about the $103,000 I'd sent them? List every time they discriminated against Lily? No, I didn't need to do that. I just posted one photo. The blue knitted scarf with uneven stitching is lying on the wooden table in my living room. With a simple caption, "My 14-year-old daughter. She taught herself to knit for 2 months to make a gift for the person she called grandma. That woman refused it and said, 'Your wife's kid doesn't have the right to call us grandpa nothingma.' I have nothing more to explain. No attacks, no mention of money, just the truth and the scarf." A few hours later, the comments under my post began to change. "She said that to a 14-year-old? The girl's been in the family all these years and still isn't considered a grandchild? The scarf is so beautiful. Poor kid. I can't imagine anyone saying that to a child." And then the comments under Mom's post began to change as well. People began asking questions, started doubting, started seeing the other side of the story. After that clarifying post, I felt like I just crossed a line I never thought I'd cross. I'd stayed quiet too long, and that silence only made Lily suffer more. 2 weeks after Christmas night, when I got home from work, Rachel handed me a small package. No sender's name on the outside, just an address from a law office in Upper Arlington, the wealthiest area of Columbus. I opened it. Inside was a thick envelope and a handwritten letter. The moment I saw the familiar handwriting, my heart skipped a beat. It was Aunt Helen's handwriting, Dad's older sister. Aunt Helen is 72 this year, widowed for 8 years. Her husband used to own a large car dealership in Columbus and left her considerable wealth when he passed away. She has no children and lives alone in a mansion in Bexley. I'd only met her a few times in my life, mainly at family funerals or weddings. But what I remembered most about Helen was how my parents talked about her. They hated her. Hated that she was wealthy but never lent them money. Hated that she lived independently and didn't need anyone. Hated that she was the only one in the family who dared say things to their faces that no one else dared say. To me, Helen was the second mother I'd always wished for. Every time I met her, though rare, she always asked about me with genuine concern. She was the only family member who sent a congratulations card when Lily entered 6th grade, even though she'd only been with me for a few years then. I opened the letter, my hands slightly trembling. The first line read, "Marcus, I've read everything online. I didn't call because I wanted you to receive this first." I flipped to the thicker envelope and opened it. Inside was a stack of notarized legal documents. A trust fund for Lily Mitchell Webb and Mason Webb. I continued reading the letter, line by line. "I met with my lawyer last week. The portion of my estate I had planned to leave to Harold and Tyler will now be placed into a trust fund for your children. Both of them, Lily and Mason. This is my gift to Lily, my granddaughter. Tell her that she is blood family, no matter what anyone says." I paused, swallowed hard, then kept reading. "Look at my life and tell her about it. I don't have children, not because I didn't want them, but because life didn't give me that opportunity. But I understand one thing. Family isn't defined by blood. Family is defined by love and choice. You chose Lily, and I choose both your children. As for Harold and Patricia, I'll just say this. Pride won't feed them in their old age. But that's their choice, not yours. The last line of the letter made my eyes blur. Tell Lily I'd love to receive that scarf, if she still wants to give it to someone. I promise to wear it every winter. I sat in the living room, looking at the letter and legal documents in my hands. Rachel came over and sat beside me, not saying anything, just putting her hand on my shoulder. And for the first time since Christmas night, I cried, not from sadness, but from realizing that amid all this chaos, there was still someone who saw Lily the way I saw her. Still, someone who understood that love doesn't need a birth certificate to prove itself. After receiving the letter and documents from Aunt Helen, I knew I needed to talk to Lily. That evening, when Mason was fast asleep, I called her down to the living room and told her everything. About Aunt Helen, about the trust fund, about having someone in this family who truly considered her a real granddaughter. Lily sat quietly listening, her eyes gradually turning red. When I finished, she hugged me tight, tighter than she'd ever hugged before, then whispered words that made me tear up. Thank you, Dad. Not thank you, Uncle Marcus, like that first day we met. Not thank you, Uncle, like the years after. But thank you, Dad. Rachel came out from the hallway, carrying Mason. Turns out the little guy wasn't sleeping but had snuck down to listen. The four of us hugged in the living room, nobody saying anything more, just the sound of the ticking clock and the warmth of people who truly belong together. As for the other family, I heard the months after were very difficult for them. The money I'd been sending monthly suddenly disappeared, and debts started piling up. Eventually, they had to sell the house in Westerville to make ends meet. Tyler disappeared after hearing about Aunt Helen's will, probably went off to find new funding sources for startup dreams that would never come true. And that was the price they paid for refusing to love a child for all those years. The $1,200 a month I used to send them, I now use for better things. Opened a savings account to buy Lily her first car when she goes to college. Take Rachel to the spa once a month because she deserves to rest. Let Mason join the football team he'd been dreaming about. Small things that bring absolute joy to the people I love. A year has passed since that Christmas night. We're living more peacefully than ever. We travel more, and write to Aunt Helen more often. Last week, she sent us a photo from Switzerland, in which she's smiling, wearing the blue knitted scarf with uneven stitches around her neck. Lily looked at that photo for a long time, then smiled, the first genuine smile since last Christmas night. And I knew the wound in her heart was slowly healing. That's the end of my story. Do you think I went far enough? Was decisive enough? Leave me a comment with your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit like on this video to support stories like this one. See you next time. I never thought a 13-year-old girl's dress could tear apart an entire family. Have you ever felt what a father goes through when he watches his daughter get betrayed by her own family? It's like someone just punched you straight in the chest, leaving you breathless and not knowing how to react. This is the story of the most crucial celebration in my daughter's life, where Maya was scheduled to meet the state governor to receive the Outstanding Student Award for the entire state. However, everything became complicated when the dress she'd been preparing for 2 months was destroyed overnight by my own niece. When the family split into two sides, I had to face the question, should a father stay silent when his daughter gets hurt by the family? And the bold decision of a 70-year-old grandmother changed everything. Before I begin the story, I would like to extend my sincere thanks for taking the time to read our story today. Hello everyone, I'm David Martinez, 38 years old, and I work as a software engineer in Austin. The story I'm sharing today took place at the end of March this year, when my daughter was about to attend the most significant event of her life. Maya, 13 years old, my only child. She has big, round, brown eyes, just like her mom, who left us when Maya was 10, and a curious personality that never tires. For the past 2 years, Maya had been working hard on a solar energy project that could be used in rural schools. I watched my daughter stay up late every night, drawing diagrams and calculating complex numbers that even I couldn't fully understand. The moment I saw my daughter buy physics energy books with her own allowance money, I knew Maya was genuinely committed to this project. She wasn't just learning theory but also building small solar panel models with her own hands in our garage. When I came home late from work, I'd often see the desk lamp still on and the sound of laptop keys clicking from Maya's room. That's when I discovered that my child's passion was something truly worth treasuring. Then, at the end of February, what Maya had been hoping for happened. She ran into my room with bright, shining eyes, holding an official envelope in her hand, screaming with pure excitement. "Dad, I got chosen. I got invited to the statewide Outstanding Student Celebration." My heart felt like it stopped beating. In all of Texas, only 50 students were chosen from thousands of different projects. My daughter, a kid living in a normal family with a simple life, had just achieved something that so many other students could only dream of. Maya was going to meet the state governor and present her project to the top education officials in the state. Right after the school announcement, she hugged me tight and whispered with a voice shaking from emotion, "Dad, I can't believe this is real." I understood how she felt. We live in a normal family. I'm just a software engineer with a stable salary. Nothing particularly wealthy. However, my daughter had achieved something that went far beyond what I'd ever expected. That feeling of pride made me want to cry from joy. From the day she got the news, Maya started preparing her outfit, that special navy blue dress she'd saved up money to buy after choosing it many times. For 2 whole months, Maya would often quietly stand in front of the closet, look at the dress and smile. She was so excited that every week she'd ask me, "Do you think I can impress the governor?" Every time I heard that question, my heart filled with pride. My daughter wasn't just brilliant, but also humble and always striving to do her best. To save the $200 hotel cost, I decided to drive back to Riverside to stay at my parents' house. The family house was only a 10-minute drive from the event location, so why waste money on a hotel? I knew that my sister, Carmen, and her 14-year-old daughter, Isabella, were staying there temporarily after her divorce 3 months ago. My sister and I never really got along since we were kids, but I thought that with this special occasion, everything would go smoothly. I didn't know that the decision to save $200 on a hotel would cause my daughter to go through the longest night of her life. Around 7 in the evening on Saturday, after a drive of more than 2.5 hours, the car brought us back to the familiar childhood home. I could smell Mom's signature apple pie scent as soon as I got out of the car, but the somewhat cold atmosphere when we entered the house already signaled to me that something wasn't right. My mom, Carol, came out to greet us at the door with a radiant face, hugging Maya tightly and stroking her beloved granddaughter's hair. While hugging her granddaughter, she stepped back to look Maya up and down with admiring eyes, then said with an affectionate voice full of pride, "I'm so proud of you. Maya's smart just like your dad when he was little." My dad, James, also came out from the inner room, spreading his arms wide to welcome his granddaughter. He patted Maya's shoulder with a warm smile, looking at her with admiring eyes, then asked Maya eagerly, "Are you ready for the special day? I'm so excited about your meeting with the governor." Maya smiled brightly, carefully placed the dress bag down beside her, then answered Grandpa proudly, "Grandpa, I've prepared everything. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow." Right then, I saw Carmen appear from the living room with an unreadable expression. My sister didn't seem enthusiastic about our arrival, standing at a distance and observing the warm greetings before nodding casually. "Hi, David." Maya's gotten so tall. Carmen's cold reaction when witnessing the warm welcome Maya received from Grandma and Grandpa made me feel uneasy. She didn't show joy or pride like Mom and Dad, but just stood there with indifferent eyes as if Maya was just an ordinary kid visiting. Then Isabella appeared from the staircase. The 14-year-old was slightly taller than Maya and had striking features. Isabella looked Maya up and down, then let her eyes drift to the carefully placed bag. She seemed pretty indifferent, then asked in a normal voice, "Maya, what did you bring? It looks essential." Maya looked at her cousin with innocent eyes, a bit confused by the unexpected question, but still tried to explain politely, "Isabella, this is the dress I'll wear when I meet the state governor. I got invited to the statewide Outstanding Student Celebration." Isabella nodded lightly, looking unimpressed. I noticed something different in her eyes. They were no longer as friendly as they had been in previous meetings. It seemed like she was comparing herself to Maya. Throughout dinner, the tense atmosphere continued to escalate with Carmen's comments. She kept subtly comparing the two kids, and I saw her look at Maya, then back at her own daughter with sad eyes. In the middle of the conversation about Maya's achievement, she suddenly interrupted with a complaining voice. Why does everyone only pay attention to Maya? Isabella's talented, too, but nobody cares. I tried to stay calm for Maya's sake, placing my hand on my sister's shoulder in a comforting gesture, then advised with a quiet voice, Carmen, Isabella's very talented too. Don't compare the kids like that. Each one has its own strengths. But Carmen continued with her implications, looking straight into my eyes with an annoyed expression, then said bitterly, actually, Isabella studies science too, just wasn't lucky enough to get chosen. That statement bothered me because it diminished the value of Maya's efforts. My daughter's achievement wasn't due to luck, but to 2 years of relentless hard work. I saw my daughter sitting quietly, trying not to show her emotions, but I knew she was hurting. In the middle of dinner, Maya leaned over to me, looked around carefully, then whispered worriedly in my ear, Dad, why does Aunt Carmen keep saying stuff like that? Did I do something wrong? I looked at my daughter with sympathetic eyes. Maya was still too innocent to understand the complex emotions of adults. I could only reassure her that everything was fine, but I understood Carmen was jealous of Maya's success. This made me feel uncomfortable and worried about my daughter. When they saw the situation getting tense, Mom and Dad tried to create a cheerful atmosphere by telling family stories and asking Maya about her science project, but the tension was still clearly present. Carmen occasionally made comments that made the atmosphere heavier. At the end of dinner, when everyone was sitting, drinking coffee and chatting, Carmen suddenly looked straight at Maya meaningfully. She stayed silent for a moment, then commented bitterly, maybe we should invest more in Isabella. She deserves good opportunities too. That statement was like an arrow aimed straight at Maya. My daughter looked down, clearly feeling uncomfortable from Aunt Carmen's not-so-subtle implications. Isabella heard her mom's words and turned to look at Maya curiously. She leaned toward Maya, then said in a normal voice but with a hint of challenge, Maya, what will you do at the party? I want to know too. Maya responded politely, trying to hide her discomfort, then answered quietly, I'll present my project and meet education officials. Isabella. When I saw Maya quietly get up and retreat to her room early after that exchange, my heart tightened. But I told myself there was only one day left, everything would be fine, and we'd get through it. I never expected that the jealousy of 2 generations in the family would lead to a conflict I could never have imagined. That night, before Maya fell asleep in my childhood room, I comforted her with a few words so she'd understand that not everyone meant anything bad. It was just that her achievement was so outstanding that it was normal for others to admire and feel a bit jealous. But I had no idea that jealousy could turn people into scary beings, especially in teenagers with unstable emotions during puberty. Before kissing her forehead and wishing my daughter good night, I still glanced at the dress bag she treasured, hanging next to the closet. Although I was still worried, I believed everything would be fine. But I was dead wrong. The absolute nightmare was beginning. Around 7 o'clock on Sunday morning, I was sitting in the kitchen, enjoying a cup of coffee. Mom and Dad had gone out to exercise early, and the house was peaceful. Suddenly, piercing screams and the sound of objects crashing from the second floor made me jump, and I dropped my cup on the table. I rushed up the stairs 3 steps at a time, my heart pounding like a drum. The screaming grew louder and louder, accompanied by the sounds of hard impacts against walls and floors. As soon as I stepped onto the second floor, the scene before my eyes made me freeze like a statue. Maya and Isabella were rolling around on the floor, hair messy, faces red with anger. Around the 2 girls were pieces of a broken desk lamp and books scattered everywhere. Maya was sobbing uncontrollably, trying to grab Isabella's sleeves and screaming desperately, Take off my dress. Take it off right now. You ruined my dress. That's when I realized Isabella was wearing Maya's blue dress. But now it was torn to shreds in many places and had red stains that looked like wine. The dress my daughter had prepared for so many days now looked like a mess of fabric. Isabella was crying too, but she didn't seem remorseful. Instead, she fought back violently. She tried to push Maya away and screamed defiantly, "I didn't mean to. I was borrowing it. Why did you hit me?" Maya completely lost control. I'd never seen my daughter this angry. She grabbed Isabella's hair tightly and pulled hard, her face burning red with rage, then screamed frantically, "You destroyed the most important day of my life. You know I'm meeting the state governor tomorrow." Isabella wasn't backing down either. Even though she was wearing the torn dress, she still confronted fiercely. She grabbed Maya's hair and pulled back, her voice shaking with anger. "It's just a dress. You're making too big a deal out of this. I'll buy you a new one." The crying and screaming of the two girls echoed throughout the house. I saw tears streaming down Maya's cheeks, my child's eyes full of despair and pain. Isabella seemed angrier than sorry. Maya tried to pull the dress off Isabella, but this only made the dress tear more. She sobbed and screamed desperately, My dress is ruined. What am I going to wear tomorrow?" Isabella got pulled forward and hit her head on the desk leg, making her cry out. But instead of apologizing, she rubbed her head and then yelled back at Maya defiantly, "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to try it on. Why did you hit me? You're the wrong one." The scene of two teenage girls fighting like this completely shocked me. This wasn't just a typical argument between two kids, but an explosion of emotions that had been building up for a long time. Maya was desperate because her dress had been destroyed, and Isabella refused to admit fault, instead trying to justify her wrong actions. I jumped in to intervene immediately, trying to separate the two girls from each other. Their strength during their rage caused my hands to get scratched in several places when I tried to pull Maya away. Just as I separated the two kids, hurried footsteps from the staircase rang out, and my sister appeared. Instead of asking about the situation, Carmen rushed straight to hug Isabella, who was wearing the torn dress, her eyes red from crying. That's when everything became impossible to control. In the thick atmosphere filled with accusations, I held Maya in my arms and tried to cool down the anger in my child. But beside me, my sister and her daughter continued attacking us like we were the ones at fault. I looked at the two girls after the fight just now. Maya had messy hair, a red face from crying, and a few minor scratches on her hands. Isabella was still wearing the torn dress, her eyes swollen from tears, but her face remained stubborn and defiant. Sadness welled up in me seeing that two kids in the family had fought like this. But when I looked at the ruined dress, I knew who started this story. To protect my daughter, I needed to hear Maya's version first. I placed my hand on my daughter's shoulder and asked her to tell me what happened calmly. Maya wiped her tears, tried to control her emotions, then said to me with a trembling voice, "I woke up and didn't see my dress where it was before. I searched all over the house and found Isabella wearing my dress, sleeping in the room next door." My daughter choked up, trying to continue telling what happened. I saw Maya's eyes full of anger when she remembered the morning scene. She continued with an increasingly angry voice, "I woke Isabella up and told her to take the dress off, but she said the dress was hers now." Hearing this, I turned to look at Isabella with stern eyes. The girl showed no remorse. Instead, she raised her head defiantly. Isabella looked straight into my eyes and said, "I already wore it. Now it's mine. Whoever wears it first gets it." But instead of scolding her daughter for her actions, Carmen immediately jumped in to defend Isabella. She turned to me with an angry face and pointed straight at Maya. She yelled harshly, "David, your daughter hit Isabella first. Why aren't you blaming Maya instead of questioning my child?" I couldn't believe what I just heard. My sister was defending her child's wrong behavior instead of teaching Isabella about respecting other people's property. When Maya heard Isabella say that, emotions exploded in the little girl. My daughter screamed desperately, "No, that's the dress for my most important party. Isabella has no right to take it." Isabella didn't give in at all. She stood straight and looked Maya up and down with contempt. Isabella's eyes were full of malice when she said, "Maya doesn't deserve to wear such a beautiful dress. She's ugly and short. Wearing this dress would make it uglier." Those cruel words were like a slap in the face to my daughter. Maya couldn't stand the insults. She was about to rush in and grab back the dress. However, I quickly pulled her back because I knew the situation would only worsen. When Carmen saw me pull Maya back, she immediately hugged Isabella tightly and criticized me. She yelled accusingly, "David, do you see that? How violent your daughter is. Isabella was defending herself. I held Maya tightly as she trembled with anger, trying to stay calm, but my voice was starting to harden. I looked straight into Carmen's eyes and said, "Carmen, your daughter stole Maya's dress and said hurtful things to my child. Don't you see that's wrong?" My sister looked at me as if I were saying something ridiculous. She shook her head stubbornly and replied, "It's just a dress. Maya's making too big a deal." Isabella already apologized, but from the beginning until now, I hadn't heard Isabella say a single word of apology. On the contrary, she was still hugging the dress tight like it belonged to her. Right when the tension escalated to its peak, footsteps from the staircase rang out. Mom and Dad appeared. They'd apparently heard the whole argument from who knows when. Mom's face went pale when she saw this scene. Dad looked around with stern eyes, observing Isabella still wearing the torn dress and Maya crying in my arms. He ordered with a decisive voice, "Everyone downstairs to the living room right now. We need to solve this seriously." And right then, I knew things could no longer be controlled like before. Around 8 a.m. on Sunday, instead of the warm and cheerful breakfast Mom and Dad had expected, they had to replace it with a tense family meeting. The moment all of us sat down in the living room with happy family photos hanging on the walls and tears from 2 granddaughters, everything seemed to be falling apart piece by piece. Dad sat down on the sofa, his face red with anger when he saw the scene before him. He observed the torn dress on Isabella, then looked straight into his granddaughter's eyes, his gaze cold and sharp. He asked with a voice full of anger, "Can someone explain to me what the hell is happening in this house?" I tried to stay calm and told the whole story, from when I heard the screaming to the fight between the 2 girls. While I explained, Dad listened with increasingly stern eyes, gripping the chair arm so tight his knuckles turned white. Mom stood next to Dad, looking at Isabella with profound disappointment. She turned to Carmen, her voice trembling with emotion, then said, "Carmen, do you know what happened?" Carmen sat hugging her daughter tightly, still trying to cover for Isabella. She looked at Mom with pleading eyes and replied stubbornly, "Mom, Isabella just borrowed the dress. It was just an accident." Dad couldn't take it anymore when he heard this. He stood up from his chair, pointing straight at Isabella with an angry gesture, and yelled, "Isabella, why did you take Maya's dress without permission? And why is the dress ruined like this?" Isabella shrank in her mother's arms, but her eyes still showed defiance and refused to admit fault. She shook her head hard and answered with a trembling but still stubborn voice, "I was borrowing it. Maya hit me first." Mom saw Isabella's attitude and stepped closer with determined eyes. She bent down to look straight into Isabella's eyes and said coldly, "Isabella, I've lived 70 years. I know when someone's telling the truth and when they're lying. Now tell me everything that happened last night." The pressure from Grandma's stern gaze, along with the tense atmosphere in the room, made Isabella start to waver. She looked around and saw that everyone was waiting for an answer. After a moment of silence, she burst into tears and confessed with a choked voice, "I took Maya's dress last night when Maya was sleeping." When Carmen heard her daughter's confession, she was utterly shocked and let go of Isabella. She looked at her daughter with disbelief in her eyes. Isabella saw herself abandoned by her mother. She cried louder and continued telling with a voice mixed with anger and fear, "I wore the dress to Sarah's birthday party. Someone spilled wine on the dress. I didn't mean to ruin it." When Dad heard about the wine, his face turned red with anger. He pointed straight at Isabella and yelled like thunder, "You're 14 years old and going to parties with alcohol? Carmen, where did you let your daughter go without knowing?" Carmen was completely panicked when Dad scolded her. She turned back and forth between her daughter and her parents. She stammered, I didn't know Isabella went to a party. I thought she was at her friend's house studying." Maya heard Isabella finally confess the truth. She cried while pointing at the torn dress. "Does everyone see now? I told the truth from the beginning. My dress is ruined. What am I going to wear tomorrow?" Mom looked around the room with deeply disappointed eyes. She saw Isabella still hugging the torn dress tightly, as if it belonged to her. Maya was sobbing and Carmen was panicking, unsure of what to do. She said with a cold and decisive voice, "Isabella, take that dress off right now. It's not yours." Isabella heard Grandma's order, but she still stubbornly hugged the dress to her body and yelled defiantly, No. I already wore it. This dress is mine now. But before Mom could react to Isabella's rude attitude, Carmen jumped in to defend her child once more with a statement that shocked all of us. Right after Isabella's confession, Carmen immediately spoke up with arguments that sounded reasonable but were utterly wrong. My sister insisted that Isabella was just a kid who didn't understand. Borrowing the dress was a minor thing, and I was overreacting. Carmen even blamed my parenting style, saying Maya was spoiled too much and didn't know how to share with her cousin. The argument between the two siblings quickly escalated when I fought back against Carmen's unreasonable defenses. I emphasized this was the most crucial day of Maya's life, and Isabella had acted like a thief, not simply borrowing. Carmen angrily replied that the family always favored me and my daughter, while Isabella was mistreated. Throughout the argument, Dad sat silently, but his face grew redder with anger as he saw his eldest daughter defend the wrong behavior. Mom stood beside him with pained eyes, unable to believe Carmen could make excuses for Isabella after everything that happened. The two kids sat quietly, witnessing the fierce conflict between two generations of adults. Finally, when she saw the situation couldn't be controlled anymore, she stepped forward with a stern face I'd never seen before. She took a deep breath, trying to control her emotions, then yelled with an angry voice, "Enough, Carmen. Do you think I'm too old to hear what's going on?" Carmen was surprised because this was the first time she had heard Mom speak to her in that tone. She looked at her silently with fearful eyes, not daring to argue back. Mom slowly walked closer to Isabella, who was still hugging the torn dress tight. She bent down to look straight into her granddaughter's eyes, her eyes full of disappointment when she said, "Isabella, you did wrong and you lied." Then she stood straight, turned back to Carmen with a pained face. Her voice trembled with emotion when she asked, "Carmen, how did you raise your daughter? Stealing other people's things and then arguing with adults?" Carmen realized Mom was furious, so she tried to defend once more. She put her hand out to protect Isabella and said pleadingly, "Mom, Isabella's just a kid. She doesn't understand the seriousness of this. I'll teach her." Mom shook her head. She raised her hand to cut off Carmen's words. She looked around the room with pained eyes and said, "In this house, we never hurt each other. I want to make peace, not have anyone leave." I felt the sincerity in Mom's voice. She honestly didn't want to divide the family, just hoped the two granddaughters could reconcile. Mom looked at Maya with encouraging eyes. My daughter understood Grandma's meaning. She wiped her tears and stood up, though she was still trembling. Maya stepped closer to Isabella with sincere eyes and said, "Isabella, I'm sorry for hitting you. I shouldn't have lost my temper and hurt you like that." All of us stayed silent, waiting for Isabella's reaction. Mom looked at her granddaughter with hopeful eyes, praying that Isabella would have the courage to admit fault and apologize. But instead of showing remorse, Isabella raised her head to look at Maya with hostile eyes. She hugged the dress tight to her chest and said defiantly, "I'm not sorry. Maya's ugly and doesn't deserve to wear a beautiful dress like this." The moment she heard Isabella say such cruel words, Mom's face went ashen. She was like someone had slapped her, stepping back with disbelieving eyes. She looked at Carmen as if seeking an explanation, but my sister still stayed silent, covering for her child. At that moment, Mom turned to look at Dad, who was sitting with a stunned face. The couple looked at each other in silence, an eye conversation that only couples who'd lived together for years could understand. Dad understood his wife's meaning and what she was about to have to do. He stood up with a pained expression, turned, and walked out to the porch so he wouldn't have to witness this scene. I knew he was sad to see the family break apart, but he trusted his wife's decision. Mom stood silent for a long time, as if weighing her final decision. She looked at Isabella, still being stubborn, then at Carmen, still defending her child, and finally at Maya, who was crying quietly. Finally, with a broken heart, she made her decision. She pointed straight at the door and ordered with a cold voice I'd never heard, "Carmen, take Isabella out of this house right now. I don't want to see either of you anymore." Carmen was utterly shocked by Mom's sudden decision. She stood up with a pale face and yelled fearfully, "You can't kick us out on the street. Where are we supposed to go now?" Mom didn't waver at her daughter's pleading. She looked straight into Carmen's eyes with determined eyes and said, "This is MY house. Anyone who doesn't know how to respect and teach their children to respect can get out of here right now." Carmen saw Mom had decided to kick her out. She panicked and turned to the door, yelling desperately, "Dad, please help me. Mom's kicking me out on the street." But Dad still stood on the porch, not coming in. He silently heard his daughter's cries for help but didn't intervene, letting his wife decide. I understood he was suffering, but he knew this was the right decision. Carmen saw that Dad didn't appear. She collapsed in the chair and started crying and begging, "Mom, I'm begging you. Isabella's still young. I'll teach her. I promise." But Mom was firm with her decision. She turned her face away, not looking at Carmen, and pointed to the stairs. "Go get your things downstairs right now. I don't want to hear another word." Isabella finally realized the serious consequences of her actions. She burst into tears when she saw Grandma was determined to kick her out, but the desperate apologies couldn't make the woman who once loved her granddaughter change her mind anymore. Carmen and her daughter were forced to pack their belongings amid tears and pleas for help. The house sank into a gloomy atmosphere as a family was being permanently divided. When the sound of Carmen's car drove away, carrying Isabella still wearing the torn dress, Mom stood by the window watching with tear-filled eyes. She turned to look at Maya, hugging me and crying, then said with a gentle but determined voice, "Son, we have work to do for Maya." When I thought Mom would go with us to buy Maya a new dress at the mall, it wasn't what I expected. She decided to do something I hadn't thought about in a long time, go back to the tailoring profession she'd been devoted to throughout her youth. Sunday afternoon, Mom took Maya to the fabric store near the house. On the way, she told her granddaughter about the days when she was a seamstress for the old state governor's wife and many distinguished ladies in the city. Seeing my child's admiring eyes when I told her stories about Grandma's glorious past, I knew Maya was understanding that the most talented hands would make the upcoming dress she'd ever known. My daughter chose a darker navy blue than the old dress, looking more elegant and refined with Grandma's help. That evening, Mom sat by the old sewing machine in the small room with determined eyes. She told Maya that this dress would be more special than any dress money could buy, because it was made with Grandma's love. All Sunday night, 3 generations of us worked together. I stayed up with Mom, helping cut fabric and preparing tools. Maya sat beside, learning how to hand-stitch from Grandma. In the yellow light, Mom told Maya that this dress wasn't just for wearing, but to remember family love and the strength to overcome difficulties. She taught her granddaughter that actual value isn't in material things but in what we do for each other. When the dawn light shone through the window, the perfect dress was born. It was more beautiful than the original dress and carried within it a grandmother's love. Monday morning, Maya walked into the Texas State Capitol Auditorium in her new dress. She glowed with confidence and pride. Many people praised the beautiful dress, and Maya proudly told them how her grandma had stayed up all night sewing it for her. When meeting the state governor, Maya presented her solar energy project excellently. The governor was impressed with both the project and the story about the dress, calling it a symbol of family love and perseverance. Maya received her certificate and scholarship. This was my daughter's most glorious day and also the day I was most proud of being a father. After Maya received her award, we said goodbye to Mom and Dad and returned to our life in the little house in Austin. Before leaving, I hugged them tight and apologized for letting the family go through such painful days. But when they hugged both Maya and me, saying we had done the right thing in protecting each other, I felt my heart warm up. That's when I understood that true love isn't always gentle, but sometimes has to be strong and decisive to protect what's right. 6 months passed, and Maya became more confident and more assertive. But every night, I asked myself if I had done the right thing. The relationship with Carmen was like an open wound that never healed. My sister's blaming phone calls broke my heart, but Dad constantly reminded me it was a necessary lesson. Mom often sat quietly looking out the window during my visits with my child. I knew she was missing Isabella. She told me that kicking her granddaughter out was the most painful decision of her life, but she hoped someday Isabella would understand. 3 months ago, when Isabella's apology letter arrived, Maya held it trembling. My daughter read it over and over many times, tears falling on each line of text. She still hasn't decided whether to forgive or not. The dress Grandma made has now become Maya's most precious treasure. Every time my daughter opens the closet and sees it, she quietly smiles and remembers the long night when 3 generations fought together for love. Yesterday, Dad called to tell me about Carmen coming to the house begging for forgiveness. He shared about my sister's complicated life, having to raise a teenage child alone, along with the psychological wounds from her broken marriage. Mom and Dad would be the only support for Carmen and her daughter during this time. That's when I realized that family love is a long journey with ups and downs, painful but necessary lessons, and finally the ability to forgive when people truly change. My story ends here. Before I conclude, please let me know your thoughts. Did I make the right decision? And if Isabella is genuinely remorseful, should we open our hearts to forgive? Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you found it interesting, don't forget to hit subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. See you in the following stories.